And out in the Pacific, we now have Tropical Depression 1E, a couple hundred miles off the Mexican coast, the first tropical depression of the year. This will become Tropical Storm Alvin soon as it gets more organized and more intense. We'll get you updated on what could very soon be the first named storm of the year. And the Atlantic season looms. It'll be here on Sunday. We're reflecting on lessons learned from years past and looking ahead to what we can expect in the new season. We're taking you to Cedar Key, Florida, where they're rebuilding after being slammed by 3 hurricanes in just 13 months. That's all right now on Fox Weather Now. There it is, Tropical Depression 1E. We had said it 1 because it's the very first of the season in either basin, Pacific or Atlantic. The E stands for Eastern Pacific, so it's the designator that the National Hurricane Center uses, so we know where this thing is. 5 p.m. advisory, first one of these issued this year by the National Hurricane Center. Winds are at 35 miles per hour, so basically the National Hurricane Center has told us the structure is there. By definition, they're comfortable calling this a tropical system, a tropical depression. Any stronger, now that the structure is there, this will be considered a tropical storm once that gets bumped up to 40 miles per hour. If you've been with us, we were talking about this general envelope and how it had consolidated some. It appeared as though this had gotten better organized over the past 6 to 12 hours. And right in through there, I'm wondering if that's what did it. There's this new, even now, some new thunderstorms erupting, and they're banding something like that. There are some curved bands. That's probably where they're calling that low-level center, and it's probably, seeing that on satellite, one of the reasons that they went ahead and bumped this up to a tropical depression, or at least acknowledged that the structure was there. And in the short term, it's got a pretty good setup for this to become a stronger system, staying at tropical storm intensity, but becoming a pretty well-formed tropical storm by the time we get to Friday morning. That's only 36 hours from now, and the forecast, keep in mind, it's the very first forecast from the National Hurricane Center. It's a brand new system, and those forecasts are typically more prone to error. It's up to 65 miles per hour, so that's a well-formed tropical storm in Alvin at that point. From there, thankfully, Alvin's got big problems moving farther off to the north, and you can see with the low-level spin, it weakening and becoming more ragged on approach to the southern tip of the Baja. That has a whole lot to do with the fact that it quite literally runs out of gas. Right about this latitude here, you get south of it, that darker red indicates sea surface temperatures in the upper 80s and low 90s, or to about 90. That's super supportive for the intensification of a tropical system. North of that, you get into those greens, the 70s. That's not even enough for the system to maintain its intensity. So this is decaying as it moves farther off to the north. Not to mention there's some dry air in the mix and a bunch of wind shear that'll be forcing in that dry air and basically tearing the top right off this system and making it lopsided at the very best. I think this thing gets effectively completely shredded, but some of that moisture around that upper level low, you can see it here, likely pivots, gets pulled in up toward the desert southwest, and that could enhance the coverage of some rain and thunderstorms out that way. So there will be a lot to watch.
You know, we live in a beautiful state. We got beautiful beaches, but guess what? We have hurricanes every so often. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. You can always rebuild your house. You can't rebuild your life. So the most important thing is get prepared. I want everybody to do it. I'm traveling the state. I was in Southwest Florida yesterday, today in Miami and Tampa, tomorrow in Orlando and Pensacola, just working to get the state ready.
That's Florida Senator Rick Scott describing the deal you make when you live down in the hurricane zone, such a beautiful part of the country, but dealing with the potential for hurricanes is part of life. And now we've got this 2025 Atlantic season drawing closer, and folks that live in the hurricane zone have to prepare as they always do. The Sunshine State, though, hit especially hard last year. 3 landfalling hurricanes, a couple of majors. Jane, we've got Fox Weather's Jane Menard back with us today. Pacific jumped Atlantic because of the new developments, but we're only a few days out from the start of the Atlantic season. It's wild to say that.
I know it's hard to wrap your head around that June is next week, but here we go, and you need to be prepared. I mean, we have these conversations now just so that you can best equip yourself with the tools and the knowledge that you need going into the season ahead of us. Now, June typically can be a messy month for any tropical disturbances. There's been some chatter that the start of hurricane season may start off a bit active. No guarantee that we'll see that pattern come to fruition, but let's take a peek into what we're watching right now, at least now and then in the next couple of weeks. Tropical waves, we've got a pair out there right now, one emerging into the Caribbean as we speak, one just off the coast of South America. Now, there is plenty of moisture here, but you can see some drier air across the Caribbean, down across the ITCZ, where you have that lift and that abundant thunderstorm action into the northwestern Gulf, where we have that dying front and some showers and storms that have picked up along it. But we've got a lot of wind shear too, and those hostile upper level winds, a very present feature to the beginning of the season. It's a limiting factor to getting any of those tropical waves, any kind of oomph to become something a little more. That tropical growth is certainly hindered. Dust is another factor, especially early on in the season. We've got a big plume of it working across the main development region. That's going to lift up into the Caribbean and in fact into the Gulf as we go through the early part of next week. And so really, that's going to squander anything from coming together in the mid-levels. We'll make for some pretty sunrises and sunsets there if you live on the Gulf Coast. But this is the period that we're watching. Now, yes, we've got a big old plume of dust gearing up to move off the main development region, but there's a little bit of a lull here as we go into the later half of next week. Now, what happens in that lull? Well, we could see some increased moisture, shower and thunderstorm development in the first 2 weeks of the Atlantic hurricane season, being the first 2 weeks of June. This is likely to favor the Eastern Pacific, where dust is less abundant as it kind of shifts up through the Caribbean and into the Gulf. We have development likely not only in the first week but into the second week of the month of June. But also too, that's when things get a little more interesting. We bring the Bay of Campeche, a sliver of the Caribbean, into the mix with that increased rain chance up through the Bahamas. We could at the very least see the opportunity for some tropical moisture to lift up into the Gulf. That would increase the rainy season across spots like the Sunshine State. But where we have that development likely, or I should say possible, through the areas of mid-June, that's typically when we'd see it. These dying fronts that move off the coast, they hang out in the Gulf, and suddenly you get a little spin of energy and a really messy system.
Yeah, it doesn't always take a whole lot, but Jane, we talked about how if it was weak, some folks would be glad to see one.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cristobal in 2020 was a perfect example. No flooding concerns, but it shaved away at some of the drought, and so people there were actually rejoicing.
Yeah, as long as you can dodge severe weather with all the spin in those things, the rain can be very beneficial right at the very end of the dry season. Jane, we're looking ahead to the new season, but we're still looking back toward last year, still ahead. Trees ripped down by Hurricane Helene last year are now making it harder for crews to fight wildfires. We're live on the ground in Tennessee, where crews are hard at work. When Fox Weather Now comes right back.
It's the final hour here on Weather Command. Thanks for watching Fox Weather. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Britta Merwin in for Marissa Torres this morning. Thanks for staying with us. It is Thursday, May 29th.
And if we've been wondering where's Alvin,
it's here.
We have Alvin, the first named storm of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. The advisory due out by 11 o'clock Eastern came a bit early, and that's when the National Hurricane Center labeled this as Tropical Storm Alvin. We've seen some persistence with the storms around the center, and Alvin showing some signs of life. In fact, strengthening is expected over the next 24 hours as we give you live looks this morning along the Pacific coastline of Mexico. And our first visible images, Britta, some of the best work that I think our satellites offer. My opinion.
I agree. If you're going to pick one product, I mean, out of everything, I would pick Visible Satellite. You just get so much information from it, but also there is some beauty to it. I mean, it is incredible to see the definition of these clouds. Stephen's just circling and highlighting the circulation within this storm.
Yeah, probably where the center is. I think that's the unique thing about these systems, that while you try to look for the center of the storm, because a hurricane, in theory, as it begins to strengthen, it will develop an eye. Probably not going to see that with this storm. I guess we'll see. Who knows? But you also, aside from what's developing around that core, and as it establishes a core, you get these bands, or you also get these flare-ups of storms that are removed from the eye. And actually,
thunderstorms to the northeast are impressive.
Some of the strongest ones that I think we have out of the whole system, just to the northeast of the eye. So the fact of the matter is, we've got a strengthening tropical storm here, and we'll be watching this, but it's right now in probably the best environment that it can find itself in.
The next 24 hours is the window.
Yeah, it's optimal opportunity. It's early in the season, though, so the ceiling that we have for this thing, it's not, like an August or September type of storm. So you manage the expectations with Alvin.
And some of that is also the track. We're already getting a northerly component to this track. The more north we go, the closer we get to this steep drop off. We go from 80-degree water temperatures to the 60s very quickly in the Pacific. And so that's why you have this forecast that, if you just paid attention to tomorrow morning, you'd be like, this is going to have 60-mile-per-hour winds in 24 hours. Yeah, I'll give you that. That's impressive. But then we're going to drop off just as quickly because our water temperatures tank. You need 80 degrees for at least 150 feet down in the water table to support growth. And when you throw in water temperatures in the 60s, I mean, it's like throwing a bag of ice on someone. You know, it's like, okay, going to cool you down. You're done.
Yep. The high confidence forecast that we have from a track perspective, the Hurricane Center mentioning that in their discussion, these lines, they're seeming to agree. Notice how we don't have some crazy outliers. If anything, the H-Wharf, this is the center of Alvin. Maybe a little to the left, a little too far left, but generally speaking, this is going to have a northward bend that it eventually takes.
I would argue, though, even that, a little bit farther to the one, it wouldn't do anything because that farther to the west solution is still in 60-degree water temperatures.
Even cooler. Yeah. When you're looking at it from an intensity forecast, even before it gets to the tip of the Baja,
there's no way around the reality.
This thing's going to be a remnant low. We will no longer be addressing or calling it Tropical Storm Alvin. It's now until maybe at the latest Saturday afternoon, but that might be a bit generous. We might see this thing begin to transition
by Friday evening,
tomorrow night. The water temperatures that we have, obviously, the closer you get to the equator, the warmer those temperatures get. You head up farther to the north, you've got some currents in the Pacific current of note that brings some very cold water from Alaska that hugs the coastline. So you get into these temperatures where, from a heat content standpoint, you're not going to have a thriving storm, especially when you're late May, the season's starting, just about 10 days ago here.
Because those water temperatures, they will warm up as we work our way into August. There's a look at the forecast here, and you can tell less impressive rotation as it moves up towards Cabo. Cabo San Lucas isn't even calling for tropical storm force wind gusts in their forecast. So what can you expect? Let's say you have a vacation in Cabo this weekend, early next week, you're getting married, you're like, oh, great. Really? Alvin's out there. Take a deep breath. The reality is it's not going to be the best weather. I mean, gosh, if you're going down to Cabo, you want beautiful blue sky, and that's not what you're going to see. You'll have cloud cover. You'll have breezy weather, some showers that move on, a couple thunderstorms as well. But given the comparison of what can happen with a tropical system for Cabo, I mean, this is easy to get through. It's inconvenient. We know that. But the bulk of what Alvin has to dish out is the next 24 hours over water.
Yeah. Christopher, keep it here for a second, because what we'll notice with the hostile winds, there is going to be some shear. And one thing about tropical cyclones, shear is a bad thing. Shear is a good thing for severe weather. That promotes the growth and the intensity. But for hurricanes and like tropical storms, it'll weaken it. It shreds the thing up. But this area of low pressure that we put here, that general troughing, that's what's going to tug Alvin to the north. And so as Alvin does trend northward, we are going to get the moisture pushing up into the southwest. So there will be impacts that we have with Alvin, but it's going to be more so Alvin's remnant moisture. Tropical in nature, yes, but this is sometimes what a weather pattern offers, where you've got the fluid and you've got something working in from the tropics. What could we deal with? The mountains in Mexico going to rob a lot of this moisture, but I do think we get some into New Mexico.
There will be a little bit left, which could be a silver lining story. New Mexico and West Texas can be blazing hot this time of year with high fire risk. To bring in some cloud cover, some shower potential, and cooler temperatures, that could be a good story for folks that live in New Mexico and West Texas.
So something we'll be paying attention to, and really as the kickoff to Atlantic hurricane season begins Sunday, our special programming will as well.
And the Pacific hurricane season is heating up. Tropical storm Alvin became well formed off the southern coast of Mexico. Thankfully, increasingly hostile conditions will shred Alvin as it approaches the southern tip of the Baja. We're also now watching another area in the Pacific for potential tropical development. We'll talk about that. It's all right now on Fox Weather Now. Hey, good Friday afternoon, everybody. Thank you, as always, for being here with us on Fox Weather. Right now, it's 4 o'clock on the East Coast, 1 p.m. out west. I'm Ian Oliver, and this is Fox Weather Now. We've been talking about this. Got our first named storm this week. It was in the eastern Pacific. It's Alvin, still a tropical storm with sustained winds at 50 miles per hour, although we got a new update coming in from the National Hurricane Center in about an hour's time. This was the 11 a.m. advisory. Winds at 50, motion northwest at 10. Pressure is up some. It's a weakening system at 1,001 millibars, and I think that trend will start to accelerate, the weakening trend, as we move forward through the next several hours. We'll talk about all this and what kind of shape the Atlantic side is in. Let's go down to the Pacific now, where Tropical Storm Alvin is weakening. We're waiting on that new update coming in a little bit less than an hour from the National Hurricane Center. There's also, though, a new area that we're watching in the eastern Pacific, and that's kind of how the EPAC operates. Once it gets going, it has stretches where it's really going. So we'll see if this is going to be one of those. That's Alvin, still several hundred miles off to the south of the Baja, drifting in that direction. You notice its structure for a little while. Second half of the day yesterday, early part of the day today, early this morning, it was looking pretty good on visible satellite, to be honest, using a ripe setup, both warm sea surface temperatures and favorable atmospheric conditions. All of that is over with. All of it is gone, and it's becoming increasingly hostile as it gains latitude, as it moves off to the north. So much so that I doubt this is still, by definition, still a tropical system arriving in the Baja, never mind a depression. Look how cool this water is. Sea surface temperatures that are just in the 70s, and with that, this is not supportive of a tropical system at all. Typically, the benchmark is about 80, up above 82. It starts becoming healthier. This is the wind shear that's acting on it. So there's this mid-level area of low pressure parked west of the Baja. That's interacting with Alvin now, too. And that was why you could see some of that cloud cover stretching off to the north and east, because at the upper levels, it's getting forced in that direction by some of those stronger winds, a little bit of dry air around, too. We'll watch these areas farther back to the south and east for a possible area of low pressure middle part of next week. So just some signs of life effectively coming out of the Pacific. Let's move over to the Atlantic side, though, and we'll bring in Jane Menard. Jane, you've had laser focus, right, on the Atlantic basin to get things started, and rightfully so. Folks can be a little bit uneasy this time of the year, especially after a year like last year.
I mean, very active, and we're still calling for above average activity. It really only takes one. I know it's kind of the moniker that we take into each season with us. Good news is, for right now, things are quiet. And this is the 4th year in a row that we haven't had any preseason activity.
Yeah, and after that run of like 7 in a row,
right? 7 years.
Yeah.
7 in a row where we had something that developed right before the season. So we watch a couple tropical waves, nothing really of note. The environment still right now is pretty hostile, but things look to change. And this is what we do now. We look for those little clues in the long range. You know, what's the weather pattern potentially going to look like? Do we see some increased storminess in this particular zone, especially zones favored closer to home in spots like the Caribbean and maybe even into the Gulf?
Just made me remember, me and BVD were hollering at each other about this earlier this week. We did have, what, 2 years ago when the NHC went back in January and said there was a storm.
But it was unnamed, so.
Fair enough. The technicalities, it all works. But yeah, you said this. It's a gyre type setup, broad area of spin over Central America into the second week of June especially.
First week we open up and it looks to really favor the Eastern Pacific, which is why, no surprise, well, next week we do have an area to watch. So that's something that we'll definitely be monitoring, but I'm looking at the increased rain and how that footprint really begins to spread across the Caribbean basin and then even up into spots of the Atlantic, the Bahamas included in this as well. So what this signals to me is tropical moisture becoming much more abundant, more rising air, and the possibility at this point with a gyre, that broad area of low pressure setting up, that we could maybe see a little seedling work into those warm waters.
Sure. I mean, you're looking for warm water. It's in both of those spots. Little pocket of favorable atmosphere, some spin with the gyre. Maybe that's just enough to do it. But most certainly over on the Pacific side, I mean, that's an actual outlook from the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, their tropical hazards. They have development likely both of those weeks in the Pacific. It could be busy there.
I think so too. And so we'll be watching. This signal to me when we see that enhancement or that favoring of increased rain and thunderstorm development further off to the east also does coincide with potentially a weather pattern that lifts those hostile winds a little further to the north. So now that really does begin to open up this region for an environment where upstairs and at the surface is more conducive for some development possible. High pressure parked off in the Atlantic is that steering component up to the north. But this is the one piece in the forecast right now that definitely will keep at least the main development region nice and quiet.
Yeah, this whole zone, if the dust is there, storms are not. And
we've got plenty of it.
Yeah.
And that dust too, that's going to work its way in to the Gulf next week.
So yeah, early season, the dust can be our friend. We'll see how long it hangs with us this year.
Listen, it was with us last 2 years pretty abundantly.
Yeah, decent chunk.